All right, everybody. I hope you're having a fantastic show out there. This is the educational part of the show today. So if you are watching this over on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, you are able to comment to our speaker today. Very hot topic, what's going on, and very themed today. This is the Made in the USA show. And the topic of the education today is Made in the USA and the challenges that are facing companies here. I was just speaking to Kenny in the background, and he said this is going to be a reality check for a lot of us. So I'm really excited for this. Just as a reminder, if you can't hear the video right now, go ahead and click that mute button that's over on the side, and that'll allow your volume to come up. Sorry, that does come up muted up on the screen. But if you are watching this over on social media platforms, make sure to comment right there over in the side, and we will get those up on the screen so that our speaker can answer those questions. Speaking of our speaker, I'm going to bring Kenny up onto the stage right now. Kenny Markanich, he is the president over at Corporate Clothier and wrote an amazing article that caught the attention of Lori, and that's why she reached out today. So, Kenny, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and speaking to us.
My pleasure.
Awesome.
Good to do so.
Yeah, this is going to be great. You guys, you can interact with this on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. So put those comments in the section over on the side there, and we will get those up on the screen so that he can answer them as he's talking. But I am going to drop off now, and you got about 25, 30 minutes, Kenny. Take it away.
Okay, thanks a lot. And we're going to pause a couple of different times for some questions. So hang in there. And I am the president of Corporate Clothier. And one of the reasons why I wrote this article for the Business Journal Leadership Trust was because we are, as a company, going stronger into Made in USA, back into Made in USA for our clientele. We build company stores for large organizations and for companies. And Made in USA was a category that people wanted. And we've decided to delve into in as big a way as possible. To provide some context for my history with Made in USA, I think it would be good to give you a little bit about where I came from, how I got involved in Made in USA way back when, and how it changed over the years. So I started out my career all the way back in the 1970s, working in New York in fashion, in the marketing arena. After a few years of doing that, I actually moved to Nashville, Tennessee, which was a hub at the time for many apparel companies. And it was a great company. It was all Made in USA. It was Washington Manufacturing Company. And I shifted over from marketing to merchandising. And these companies, like Washington, were located in Nashville and other cities around the South, Atlanta, Charlotte, because they wanted to be close to their factories. Their factories were often the hub of employment for many of small towns where people, basically hundreds of people, would work at. It'd be the largest employer in that town. And these companies wanted to be close to their factories so that people like me, merchandisers, could spend a lot of time at the factory level, learning the factory, what it made, how it made it, what it was capable of producing. And each factory had its own niche that it would work. I was more in sports shirts and dress shirts and things like that, but we had factories that all they did was knits. We had factories, all they did was overalls or jeans or khaki pants. Everyone had their niche, and that's what that factory made. And as a merchandiser, you had to plan your fabrics that you bought along with the trim that you bought for what you had designed to to fill the factory at the level that they had full employment all the time. You had to match that with sales as well. So Made in USA was an algebraic equation about bringing everything you needed from Made in USA components into the factory on a timely basis so that you could make it, and keep those people fully employed and have everything delivered on time. I started my own business as a result of that knowledge in 1988, I believe, consulting. And I took that merchandising knowledge and I went to major brands that you would recognize still today, like Duckhead and Wrangler and Lee and Ducks Unlimited, JanSport, Key Industries. And I started consulting for them, where I would merchandise, design their lines for them. And as a reward, instead of paying me as a consultant, they sourced it through me. So my Made in USA factories were making the goods that I was selling, that I was consulting for, to these brands. So all these brands were still being made in USA. This is in the 1980s. So an interesting story was Key Industries, who many of you may have never heard of before. They're still in business. They took care of the farm fleet supply, Midwest clientele, sold big numbers of overalls and workwear and things like that. Well, they wanted Western shirts. I was able to go into their factory, show them how they could tweak some machinery around to be able to make Western shirts, and then provide the fabrics to them to make those Western shirts out of. Well, they'd never made anything that wasn't all Made in USA. And convincing them to have fabric, or what we call piece goods, made in China or Taiwan or Korea or Portugal for flannels was like pulling teeth. They just didn't want to do it. But when they saw the price and when they saw the quality, and then when they saw the sales, they went heavy into it. So suddenly they were a Made in USA company, but they were still making it in USA of foreign components, of foreign fabrics, which is perfectly fine to do. They were still Made in USA. And as were all the other people that I was working with at the time. I used South Carolina factories for wovens. I used a factory up in Vermont for knits. We were blowing and going and having huge success with huge sales until regulation happened. Government regulation came in, and basically to protect the American worker, which honestly was needed, but it also had a repercussion where for factories to meet those regulations, they had to comply with them, which was a financial burden to them, to where suddenly they weren't able really to compete at the pricing level that the import companies were able to compete with. So they had plenty of business, tons of business. We were doing container loads a week of apparel for these brands like Duckhead, like Wrangler. We were doing that business, and we could not make it here profitably anymore. Suddenly it was forced to go overseas. Frankly, the timing was right for that as well, because the people that were being trained, or who were trained to do those operations, were really baby boomers, and they had the skills, they had the knowledge to run those machines, to fix those machines, to do the seaming that was necessary, to sew them, to get the needle that was necessary for the quality. But as those people started leaving the job, they couldn't get replacements. We didn't have shop class being taught any longer, or home economics being taught any longer at the high school level, where people were being trained to do those jobs. And training somebody from the ground up, it was jobs that people might not have wanted to do. And we'll get into a little bit of that later. But how does this affect you? So if we don't have Made in USA today, how does that affect you? Honestly, I'll give you some statistics on that. More than 90% of suppliers today source from China. 20% of them source from other countries like India, like Mexico, like Vietnam. And then really drops off down to 2-3% from other countries other than that. And why do they do that? Because they have to. It's a price and quality issue, availability, size of order, but it's really about the look, the make, and the quality that's coming after that. And in my case, I had customers that did not want imports, very, very large national organizations that I'm not going to say the name of. That's not what's important, but they had members that, whether it was because of political orientation or patriotism or for whatever reason, suddenly they didn't want made in China anymore. Okay. So now I'm faced with a dilemma. How do I take care of that part of the marketplace with made in USA components? And this is where we're going to pause for your comments and questions so that you can have some input here to say, has this affected you at all in this manner? We have any questions here on this?
Kenny, we don't have any questions on that particularly. We've got Jessica in the background. She has posted up the link to your article. And guys, just as a reminder, you can comment on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, and we will put those questions up for Kenny to answer while he's speaking. But I'm going to jump back.
And we can come back to this. I'm going to give you some of the answer without you even posting a question. You know, a lot of people say, well, we have to have made in USA. And we hear about it a lot. Could be from news streams that we follow, could be verbal chatter. Clearly, we got into it as a company because everyone was talking about it. And we said, this is a niche we need to be in. This is a niche we need to offer to our customers as a choice. It may not be the only thing on their company store that we build for them, but it is an avenue and a choice for them to offer some of those products. But people vote with their pocketbooks, and people sell from their pocketbooks as well. And the way to find out the actual measure of interest in this is within our industry, is how many people do searches for it when they're trying to find something for one of their end user customers. How many people do searches for made in USA? Because they have to have made in USA for this particular customer. In 2020, it was 2%. It's not much of the pie. That doubled, went up 100% in 2021 at the height of COVID to 4%. So yeah, it went up 100%, but it's still only 4% of the business. That's the number of people doing searches for made in USA because that's what they have to sell to their customer. So for a lot of people, it's really not affecting them. It's talked about a lot, but it's not the main thing that they're concerned about. The main thing they're concerned about is promoting their company in a positive way, in the best way possible. And oftentimes that's with the best product possible. And that's not coming from here at this time. So that leads into another category of our next big question anyway, of can we make it here? Is that possible? You know, and the honest answer, unfortunately, is no. Back in the 80s or actually the 90s, when everything went overseas, those are the people that invested in machinery, in the technology, in inventing new fabrics and things of that nature to have their niche. And basically importing becomes just like the factories that I used to work with back in the 80s had their niches. This factory did knits and this factory did wovens. Countries have their niches too. And we use those factories ourselves in that manner. For knits, for instance, I go to India. You know, we built a factory in India back in the 90s that literally didn't exist. but they provided the most incredible knits the world had ever seen. And it was the first ISO 9000 certified factory in the country, was the factory we built. And suddenly everybody was wanting to make it. Everybody who was big suddenly wanted to make in that factory. And you know, there was a testimony to us that we built the factory, but the fact is they needed quality, and India made knitted quality. Other countries do other things, like China does fantastic poplins and they do everything basically fabulously. But what do we make in USA? We currently today, we don't have the fabrics, the machinery, the technology, the labor force, which is a major thing, or the quality for most types of apparel, but we do for some. You know, we do for denims. We never stopped making those. We do for tees. You know, that mostly comes out of Southern California. We do fleece is the same thing. We do for canvas. Those are staple items that are high volume that we were able to stay competitive on in a USA mode because of the large volume we were able to run. Foreign countries, once you added the tariffs and duties and shipping and everything like that, they really weren't that much more competitive. And to do made in USA, we still had some sewing facilities that never shut down that specialized in those types of garments, so that we were able to continue to make them there. How we still have some high priced items that are readily made here. But those are high needle, small shops. You want to talk high fashion or something like wedding gowns or things like that, where you need that hands-on, handmade look and feel. But price is not important. We have tons of that still today, but we also have some brands that do that. If those of you who remember Bill's khakis, that's a prime example. You know, here's a guy named Bill who opened up a factory in a small town in Pennsylvania, and he found a great khaki material that draped nice, it felt good, but it was expensive. And he made in USA great khaki pants in his factory in Pennsylvania. And but the difference was he's selling those at haberdasheries for $100, $120 a pair. You know, whereas your basic duck head pants, which were now being imported as a khaki pant, you know, they're $15 a pair. Which one is most people going to buy? Where's the volume going to come from? Clearly, it's going to come from overseas at a much lower price. I'm going to pause for questions here in case anybody has a question they want to add. They can go back to the other comment that I had about, do you have customers that want made in USA? Or you can talk about where you're getting it made in USA right here, right now. And if you don't, I'm going to keep talking.
So we don't have any questions just yet, but I did post a question on the comment section over in Facebook that was basically, I just asked, do you struggle to sell US made products because, you know, they're either hard to find or they're labeled something different than USA made? So hopefully we get some responses out of that, but we do have still quite a bit of viewers going. So I'm going to drop off and let you keep talking. Okay, good.
Okay, so let me address that. You know, do we even have a customer base that's necessary for that? I've had situations where I have run into customers that wanted made in USA. They actually wanted it for political purposes, you know, and so I've had this same conversation I'm having with you today. I've had with congressmen, with senators, with governors about this exact topic, and because they hear from their constituents, we want made in USA, so they feel like they have to push the made in USA. And when they've wanted to buy shirts from me, for instance, for political purposes, you know, I say, before you buy it, you've given me an order for that, but before you buy it, I want to show you the difference. So I literally bring 2 different shirts to them to say, this one's made in USA. This one isn't. This is the one you're going to be given to your constituents as a reward or something, or have your name on. Are you sure that's the avenue you want to go? And they literally can't believe the difference in quality and price that they're getting, and in some instances have dropped the whole idea completely, because they say, no, I have to have made in USA, but I can't give them that. And that's sad, So I've had that situation pop up. However, if a company's doing this, or if a government's doing this, or a country is doing, let's just say us as the USA, if we're doing that, we as the USA need to look at that as a profit wheel that we all saw in economics class, that says, what piece of that pie is important to us to make profits off of. And do we even want this sliver of the profit pie, the cutting and sewing of the fabric, for instance? We're already importing the fabric from other countries. That's nothing new. We have to go to other countries to get those fabrics. They're simply not made here. That's impossible to get. Okay. And other countries do a great job of supplying the fabrics. So we've gotten used to that. But when it comes to the cutting and sewing of garments, do we even want this sliver of the profit pie? And I can tell you that when you look at that entire profit circle, you take into account where are the biggest margins of that coming from. And you've got shipping, you've got marketing expenses, you've got advertising profits, you've got warehousing profits, you've got fulfillment profits, you've got sales profits, you've got retail market profits. And then you've got this other little sliver over here of the profit pie that is cutting and sewing of the fabrics to turn them into a garment. And it's a very tiny piece of the profit pie. And again, senators, congressmen, they're shocked by that. Look at how much money is being made off of the sale of that one garment, whatever that garment is. 95% of it is coming back to this country. Yeah, we're giving 5% of it away, but it's for a job that, frankly, we can't fulfill here because we don't have the training to do it. And the Made in USA factories that I do work with today tell me that, Kenny, the toughest thing for us to do is to hire people, because they don't want to do that same job over and over again. And I remember back in my days working at the factories, Made in USA factories here, and I would go into the break rooms or have lunch with the people. And they'd be sitting there. The women would literally be sitting there while they're eating lunch, and their heads would be going, because that was the movement they were making when they were feeding the piece of material into the sewing machine to sew that step of the process, because that's how factories were profitable. Each person did a different step. People, I'll get to that question, Joel. People basically did one job. This person sewed the placket. This person sewed the collar. This person sewed in the armholes. And they were proficient at that. So that's what they did. People today don't want to do that job. And we don't have people trained to do that job. That's the job we're giving away to another country, unless we hire people that are willing to do it. And I will get into that in a minute. I just had a question from Joel saying, what percentage of the product must be manufactured in the U.S. to be made? I'm going to go into that in the next sequence. But basically 100% of the product must be manufactured in the USA to be made in USA. That'll be the next segment that I go into. But if you want made in USA, 100% of it has to be sourced here for that to take place. We have an organization here in Nashville called Catholic Charities. It may be in other cities as well. I expect that it is. They literally take people, immigrants that have come here. They do know how to sew, or if they don't know how to sew, they teach them how to sew, and they train them, and then they literally put them on buses and take them to Made in USA factories, to perform that skill, because that's a skill that they're willing to perform that American-born people are not on a large scale. When I walk out on the floor of the factory, you might have just 40 people. They're not big factories, and you're not hundreds and thousands or thousands of people being employed like we had over in South Carolina. There's literally, out of 40 people, there's 10 different languages being spoken. And I say to the factory owner, how do you even enforce rules here, or how do they understand? You got to. It's like the United Nations sitting out there on the floor. How do you speak all those different languages just to communicate what you need done and how you need it done? It is a tough job to do. It's a job I wouldn't want to do today, because it's so specialized in that one capacity. In apparel manufacturing jobs, they're down 50% just in the last 10 years. Before that, they must have been down 90%. But in the last 10 years, they're down 50%. And there's thousands and thousands of jobs open at factories, apparel factories right now in the US. Nobody wants to fill those jobs. Nobody wants to do it. It's because they don't want to do that job. So do we get to the point where we want to admit that we're a global economy? Or do we not? Because in reality, we are. If we want to supply the goods and resources that the customer really wants, we have to play in a global community and get those from those countries. So let me talk real quick, because we've only got a few minutes left, about what it takes to be made in the USA. That is a question we got. And as I said, it's set forth by the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, and it requires that it's made in USA be entirely made in the USA. Now, you can get around that. The customs, who enforces all this, they consider the country of origin to be the last country in which a substantial transformation took place. Well, that's transforming it from material into a shirt. That's a substantial transformation. So we have to say where we made it. We have to enforce that. You can get around that by saying designed in USA, made in China, made in Taiwan, made in Mexico, made in Korea, made in wherever, Switzerland. As long as you say, or you can even say a percentage of it. 60% is US content, 40% from a foreign source, foreign country. If you want to get the word USA in your neck, designed in USA, manufactured in China, or 60% US content made in USA, but the balance of it made somewhere else. As long as you're clear about all that stuff, you can get away with putting USA in your neck or in your label somehow, and get away with it and have that be perfectly valid. I would make sure before you actually did it to get it approved by the FTC, before you did that, so that you don't get busted by customs along the way, and you just out of plain ignorance, you made a mistake. I would get it approved. But yes, you can put the USA moniker in your label, but you got to be specific about what it's for. So that is what I've prepared for you. That's what I've got done. I'm done with my talk. And if anybody wants to contact me, I guess there's a way to contact me outside of this. I'd be glad to answer your questions outside of this. If you share my contact information with people, I'll be glad to answer their questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead and just say your email address now. I've got some people in the background that are going to help, and they'll throw the comment up and we'll get it up on screen. But what's the best email address to reach out to?
It would be simple. It's kenny@corporateclothier.com.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that is
glad
fantastic.
to answer any questions that they might have. Sure.
This is a really tough subject, and I think it's really hard when you start diving into anything that is legal or lawful. It gets drawn out, but I think what is nice here is that you've summed it up into something that is super easy and digestible, that we're able to actually look at here on the promotional product side of things, to be able to find those actual USA made or designed or USA printed, right? Like you were kind of talking about, you can kind of change the verbiage there to be able to add in that little USA. So Kenny, thank you so much for your time today. We really do appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Awesome.
Thanks, Brandon.
Awesome. You guys, thank you so much for paying attention during that and for throwing your questions out there. If you did put a question on one of the shared pieces that I threw out all over social media, we will get to those, and I will make sure that Kenny is tagged in those too so that he can get you a much better answer than I would be able to provide. But we are rolling closer and closer to the end of the show, and I'm going to put this up on the screen. Don't forget that we still have that contest going on. I have been alerted by Lori that the contest applicants are rolling in, so make sure to get your form in. You go to the promo corner booth in the flyers. The form is in there, or you can email contest@promoshow.com and get the form there too. You guys have about 29 minutes to get that form completed and back to Lori and everybody helping out over on that email address. So we have amazing products that Coaster Stone, Best, Branded Treats, and Natural Trends are all giving away that we will be raffling off, and you got to fill out that form to get entered. So we will see you guys here coming up super soon, right at 2:30. I'm going to be coming on, and I'm really proud of what we did. We are restarting this How Promo is Made deal, and we started it right with a USA made product. So how perfect and on theme. But for right now, I'm going to drop off, let you guys get back to talking to those suppliers face to face, and we'll see you at 2:30 Eastern for How Promo is Made, the new version. Here we go.